Hello everyone, welcome to Fast Track on Herald Global. I am Saimik Sen. Joining us today, a veteran in the banking sector, having served as a board member and non-executive director in ICICI Bank Group, non-executive chairman in the Federal Bank, and also as a CEO in Emirates NBD, the chairman of IBPC Dubai, Mr. Suresh Kumar. So, as a banking veteran, how has your professional journey been like?
The professional journey has been fulfilling. I think that's the word I would express, used to express my view of the journey so far today. It has had its challenges, it has had its moments of, intensity, high level of intensity, which is good, I think, because that brings focus and, more importantly, energy to the tasks on hand.
Sure.
And I've also been strategic in terms of my way through my professional journey as well as my personal journey. So many of the moves that I made were strategic, were inflection points. In some instances, I got lucky. And let me describe what I'm saying in the following manner. I was born in deep south of India.
Yes.
And in a place called Vidupuram, which is in what is now called Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu was at that time the Madras, it was the follow-up of Madras presidency. So I was born in the year 1950. So I am a post-independence, post-Republic Day product, if you like.
Yeah.
And so to speak, I did very well in primary school. I got a double promotion, which I think was unusual in those days. I went to secondary school in a town called Madurai. It's a temple town called Madurai, again, deep south. Then there was an inflection point. At the age of 13, I accompanied my sister, who was getting married and going to Mumbai or Bombay at that time. And that was quite a dramatic change in terms of a boy from the hinterland in the south to a large city like Mumbai. I think Mumbai brought a number of things. First of all, it brought a fairly radical change. I had to learn Hindi, which I did successfully, to clear my examinations. I also got to learn Marathi a little bit.
Oh, wow.
But Mumbai is not the best place to learn Marathi because everybody speaks Hindi, or
yes, true.
If Marathi is not as good as them, they lapse to English. And then, so that's when I struggled a little bit in terms of the school. I mean, I was a topper in the school in the south, but when I came to Mumbai, learning new languages took a bit of it was posed a bit of a challenge that meant that my grades were not brilliant. They were mediocre, but not brilliant. But nevertheless, I did well to join a good institution like the Sydenham College, the Mumbai University, particularly for economics. The Sydenham College was well known. So I took economics as a subject, in addition to. So that was a significant inflection point because I blossomed, as it were, in Mumbai after about 4 years there. So I was pretty active in my university days. I was General Secretary of the Students' Union, Chairman of the Literary Society or the Debating Society and the like. So I was very active, both in terms of my academic and non-academic pursuits.
Sure.
And then my first job, as it were, was in an advertising agency. It was called the Clarion McCann. It used to be, now it's part of the Ericsson McCann group, but it was called then the Clarion McCann. And interestingly, the Clarion McCann was an entrepreneurial initiative by the employees.
Okay.
who, along with a professor at the Indian Institute of Management and some of the senior advertising professionals, set up Clarion McCann as the first Indianized version of an MNC advertising agency. So I joined them as an executive trainee and learned the ropes in terms of advertising, etc. But there was a fair amount of, view that given my educational background, I should be put in media planning or media operations, which was not the flavor of the month. Everyone wanted to be account management and advertising agencies in those days. So I appeared for the competitive examinations for the SBI probationary officer's position, and I was selected, and I got my home state as it were, namely Mumbai Circle. And I spent 7 years with SBI, and those were possibly the best years in terms of learning banking.
Of course.
I think SBI is a great school. You could argue whether SBI is a great bank, but you can't take away the fact that it was a great school. There were some really talented and experienced professionals, and the probationary officers represented 1% of the employee strength of the bank, and so therefore there was a certain eclectic approach among the probationers. They flocked as a bird, or flocked as birds, as it were, so to speak. So that was a good training ground for my banking and financial career. And I was also the recipient of 2 scholarships and fellowships during those 7 years. I got a Rotary International Scholarship, which took me to California in the US. And I spent time with the banks there, with the universities there, with the likes of Berkeley University and the like, and stayed with various American families in California. So it was an excellent experience and exposure to the American society as well, in addition to banking, financial services, and the professional way of life. And I had to speak at every Rotary Club in California. There were about 45 of them, and I spoke at each one of them. And that was part of the drill for the scholarship. The following year, I was the first recipient of a fellowship called the Lord Aldington Banking Fellowship. Now that took me to the UK, Germany, Belgium. I studied the diamond industry, I studied banking, I studied central banking. I was with the Bank of England. And interestingly, one of the first files that I looked there was the BCCI file, but that's a different story. So I got to see a lot of insights from a banking supervisory perspective of a central bank, or the Bank of England, as it were. So those were 2 years. In Belgium, I studied the diamond industry. In Germany, I studied industrial finance, corporate finance, Euro currency markets and the like. And I specialized in Euro currency as part of the fellowship program. So that actually, almost like a hat trick, led me to my third move, which was I decided to accept a challenging, interesting assignment from the government of Dubai. This was in 1979, and almost on a roll. This was a position to raise a Euro currency package for one of their huge projects that were coming up. This was the Dubai Aluminum Company project. And so it was a project of $2.3 billion. $2.3 billion these days may not seem a lot of money, but in 1979 it was.
It was, of course.
Yes, and the company built up aluminum smelters, desalination plants, industrial salt. So a number of downstream and upstream projects were also associated in this project finance package. So I raised this money for the government of Dubai. and helped administer the entire package, which was a mix of supplier credit, syndicated loans, euro currency loans, floating rate notes, bonds, export credit from ECGD, COFAS, the German, French, and the UK export credit agency. So it was a highly absorbing, challenging assignment. I was on the other side of banking, but I did possibly more banking in terms of value and volume that I did in some of the smaller banks, including SBI, which was at that time a relatively domestic bank. They were not sufficiently global. So then after 5 years with that project, the project was owned by the government of Dubai, and so the Prime Minister of the country called us and said, "Look." He told me, he addressed me straight away because I've met him a few times, and he said, "You raised a lot of money, young man. I want you to pay it all back." So I had by then done a little bit of homework as to what was to be expected at that meeting, but my colleagues who were the CEO of the project and the finance director had not. So they were shocked because this was a low-cost financing that was raised. And interestingly, he just ignored them. He turned to me and said, "So can you do it?" I said, "Your Highness, your wish is my command. So we'll work on it. It might take a few months." He said, "How long will it take?" I said, "About 3 months or so, because we have to prepay some of the large loans and facilities, credit facilities that we've got. And, prepaying 150 odd institutions is not an easy task." So I said, "About 3 months, we'll try and do it as quickly as possible." Then he turned to the other two and said, he exaggerated a bit. He said, "Look, I'm not well." He exaggerated by saying, "I'm on my deathbed," because he was sort of lying down. And so therefore, he said, the young man didn't ask me questions. Since you have asked, I'm telling you now, check with him as to why he didn't. He's obviously done his homework, but we want the job to be done. I think that's the important thing, and to be done as quickly as possible. He had also personally guaranteed the financing. So I think he was keen that once he was not well, he didn't want his personal guarantee to be outstanding in the market. So very, very sagacious, very wise of him to do that. And so by then, with the ruler's office, or with the ruler's court, as it is called, I had a sufficiently good relationship. And that was a time when some of the banks in the UAE, in Dubai in particular, were in difficulties. These were family-owned banks, and so they were effectively merged together, 3 of them, and the government of Dubai took a stake, a majority stake, 80% stake. So while they didn't nationalize it, they acquired a majority stake and wanted the banking, conglomerate to be managed effectively as an organic bank. There was a lot of inorganic elements in it, a lot of non-performing loans and the like. So I was part of the team because of my previous banking background. I was drafted into that senior team there. And then I spent 27 years doing the job, both dealing with the inorganic portion of the bank. And at that time, we used to jokingly say that there was nothing right about the left side of the balance sheet and nothing left on the right side of the balance sheet. So that's, in a sense, quite true at that time. But the government pumped in enough funds to recapitalize the bank, restructure the bank. And then we, from 1985, 1987, 2 years we took to clean up the bank, and then it was an amalgam. It is now one of the largest banks in the region. It's a banking champion called SMBD.
Yes.
So that's a long story of my professional career as
Okay.
Sen. So that's what I meant by fair amount of intensity, fair amount of challenges, inflection points, etc.
Okay. So what was the vision behind establishing IBPC Dubai and Tricolor Values Group?
Yeah, IBPC Dubai was established in the year 2003. The full form of IBPC is the Indian Business and Professional Council.
Sure.
It's the largest business council for any nationality in the UAE, and it is certainly the oldest. The Indian business and professional community were represented by a number of organizations. So in a sense, the scene was quite fragmented. And the full strength of this community, which is the largest expatriate community for any nationality. The Indians are the largest single nationality grouping.
Sure.
Almost 32% of the total population of the country. So out of which a significant portion were businessmen, small businessmen, medium-sized industries, some of the multinational companies that Indians own are present. So it was a diverse group of businesses and professional activities, a number of chartered accountants, bankers, architects, doctors, you name it. Every profession was very well represented and fairly well entrenched. So it was felt, and I sort of spearheaded that initiative.
Sure.
So I had created an organization called the Indian Business Council, which was very, very successful. And after about 2 years, I said there is need to merge this and create an apex body. Because to an extent, the synergies were not there if you were too many organizations representing a community. And the government of Dubai at that stage wanted for every nationality only one business council. So we worked on it. It was easier said than done because many of the senior Indians have egos. Many of the senior institutions that they have created have bigger institutional egos. So so as they say, if you have to make an omelette, you have to break eggs. So you ended up having to make sure. And in that context, I worked very closely with the Dubai Chamber of Commerce, which is an apex body. It's a government of Dubai body. So they were very keen. The chairman of the Dubai Chamber was very keen and personally asked me to intervene and bring them together. And I told him very clearly that you have to call the shots, and say that only one council is going to be licensed, and that will be the apex body. So that's how the Indian Business and Professional Council was formed. It has had a good run. It's we're coming up to the 20th year this year. In fact, in April this year, we will be celebrating 20 years of IBPC's existence. It has had its moments when it has done excellent work. It has had a significant penetration to the Indian community, the top layer, the creamy layer, as it were. It has also had its challenges in terms of governance and the like from time to time. These were, I think, to the credit of the Indian diplomats there, the Indian ambassador and the Indian consul general of India. These were quickly addressed, and both of them are patrons of IBPC.
Sure.
And The Dubai Chamber was also very, very proactive in, agreeing to constitutional amendments that would sort of restructure, bring in some of the best practices of governance, best practices of professional management, what is now globally popular as ESG, environmental, social, and governance principles. So we adopted ESG as a commitment, IBPC Dubai, and more importantly, honed our role as a catalyst for trade and investment flows between the UAE and India. And I think in that role, IBPC has done remarkably well. It has been widely appreciated. We were also particularly active now that between the UAE and India, there is a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, CEPA. So we play a catalytic role there. So IBPC, in that sense, is now an institution here to stay and not just stay strong and focused.
Okay, so you also established the Dubai Theatre and Art Center. How does it facilitate various arts and cultures?
The Dubai Theatre and Community Center was created by a group of 4 or 5 of us. The idea was to have a community theatre which would not charge exorbitantly for its world-class infrastructure. The theatre infrastructure in Dubai got a significant boost by the creation of DUCTAC. The short form is DUCTAC, Dubai Community Theatre and Art Center. So it was the objective was both theatre and performing arts as well as creative arts.
Sure.
And so we gave the international community and the local community, the UAE national community, the opportunity to hold world-class performances. In terms of acoustics, this theatre infrastructure was absolutely at the cutting edge. But more importantly, the fact that there was a community theatre was embraced by the community, and different nationalities took up the community theatre opportunity. So there were also in parallel classes for the young. There were also in parallel, free performances that were sponsored, etc. So the entire theatre movement and the arts movement got a significant boost by the creation of the Dubai Community Theatre and Arts Center. It is that the theatre scene in Dubai has since grown significantly, and there are other theatres that have come up. So the overall capacity has increased, but DUCTAC was clearly a forerunner in that respect. And the third point that you mentioned, which was the Tricolor Values group, has a slightly different story. That's a personal initiative of mine. When I was in the bank, I created a company called Tricolor Investments. That was the first time in the UAE there was an India-focused entity. This was an investment entity. It was also one that encouraged entrepreneurs, catalysts, technology companies to set up a presence in the UAE, to set up a presence in the GCC. And we provided them with capital and funding support and the like. We also invested in India very significantly. The bank had billions of dollars by the time when I was also heading the treasury function. We had a very, very significant India book, as it were.
Sure.
So I think Tricolor Values had its genesis at that point in time. It has since grown. Post my retirement from the bank, I reactivated Tricolor. I've become a late age entrepreneur, if not late stage. Okay. And so that, is again a journey which to me is quite absorbing and fascinating. I'm able to put back some of my experience and insights and reach to good benefit. Supporting again entrepreneurs, supporting intrapreneurs. There are persons that are in organizations but creating new organizations, creating new institutions. Reflecting my own, during my 27 years with Emirates Bank or Emirates and BD Emirates Bank at that time, I created a number of institutions. I was the first to create an Emirates Merchant Bank. I was the first to create an asset management company called Emirates Financial Services. I was the founder, chairman of some of these institutions like Emirates Merchant Bank, Emirates Funds, etc. So the idea was to bring certain amount of innovation and first in class, as it were, first off the mark. And so that entrepreneurialism or intrapreneurialism, now converted to entrepreneurialism, is a strong streak in my journey. And it keeps me, so there's never a dull moment in that respect.
Okay, so what role have you played as an advisory board member in the American and British University in Dubai?
The universities, obviously needed industry support. And since I was a senior banker and, CEO of a banking group in Dubai, both of them, I played a leading part as an industry advisor in terms of both the British University in Dubai and now SP Jain group, SP Jain colleges, and the American University in Dubai, when they started, they needed industry advisors. So a few of us supported them in sort of modifying their curriculum to be relevant to the industry in terms of, for instance, more recently, artificial intelligence, AI, ML, machine learning, technology, and the like. And also, what exactly are the gaps when universities or colleges turn out graduates, business graduates? They don't readily get absorbed into managerial positions because they need some, rejigging, as it were. So if that could be done between, in terms of an industry and educational institution partnership, then it prepares the graduates for the business world, the real business world, as it were.
Okay, so how does it feel when you are honored with the award Hindi Ratan?
The Hindi Ratan award, was very satisfying for the Indian government to recognize, one of its non-resident Indians, as it were. It's also a recognition for the teams of people and others that worked with me, while mine, you could argue, is a leadership journey, and leadership often is lonely. But you're only effective in terms of institution building if you build a team, if you have a good team and a strong team and an experienced team that is committed to achieving and accomplishing what you set out to do. So any recognition that I receive is really a recognition for the people that worked with me, because they were as much stakeholders in what I did as any contribution that I might have made individually. Okay.
So as a treasury head of EGA Dubai, what responsibilities were you assigned with?
It was as the treasury head of EGA that I mentioned to you about the $2.3 billion project finance package. That was as the treasury head of EGA. I also set up their treasury systems. I set up their, world-class sales infrastructure system, because this is a group which exports 99% of its products. It was the largest industrial project of its nature at that time when it was set up. And so that has been a journey of 4.5 years, which was very fulfilling for me. to create an organization, rebuild it, and so on.
Okay. So what are the biggest challenges that the banking sector today faces, according to you?
In India, I think the challenges are twofold. One, I was the chairman of Federal Bank and I was on the board for 8 years. So I have fairly intimate knowledge of the banking sector. And more recently, since I'm also on the board of a large reinsurance company and insurance company and an asset management company earlier, and an NBFC, the way I would sum it up are two as follows. The economy is growing at a fast clip. It is now the largest and the fastest growing economy among the G20. Even though the growth rate projected is between 6 and 6.7%, it's a bit of a low compared to the days when India almost achieved 9.5%. But then 6.5% when the world is beset with issues, including conflict in Ukraine and commodity-related challenges, is excellent. I think it indicates the potential. Now, the banking sector needs to catch up with these economic impulses, the growth impulses, as it were. And I think that's where they will have to constantly run to stand still. So you will have to run twice as fast to make headway and progress. Technology is hugely helpful, and India there is blessed to be one of the technological superpowers, certainly in software terms and in terms of digitization and the public goods, as it were, Aadhaar and Jandhan and so on. So technology is there. What we need is high quality of bankers who make credit judgments very soundly. You also need structural changes in India. For instance, India inherited the universal bank concept, that is, namely, that a bank would do everything. It would do, wholesale, retail, all kinds of banking. I think it's time to move towards specialized banking.
Okay.
India needs significant infrastructure, and so the budget that you saw last week or earlier this week had huge infrastructure expenditure. Now, banks are not the best institutions for financing and funding infrastructure because they have short-term customer deposits. So you need to recreate the large term lending institutions, the large project finance institutions that we had in the 70s and 80s. They were allowed to become retail banks, which is unfortunately not a very, in hindsight, not a very good development, because you lost a lot of project finance expertise by the conversion of these erstwhile term lending institutions, project financing institutions, development banks into retail banks. Retail banking is well served. So what RBI, in my view, needs to do is to split retail banking and industrial banking. Create industrial banking institutions, allow global institutions to take shareholding, because we need huge amounts of capital to fund our infrastructure, to fund our projects, to fund our manufacturing sector. And that level of capital generation is not adequate. Our savings is excellent. It's probably one of the highest in the world, savings rate in India.
Sure.
But even those savings are not adequate to fund infrastructure on the scale, manufacturing on the scale that we intend to do to become a $5 trillion, $10 trillion economy. So the banking will have to be reimagined. Various specialized banks will have to come in. And while retail banks and public deposit-taking banks need to be protected, industrial banks, you could have ownership, even majority ownership by foreign institutions.
Sure.
You need to bring expertise like the KfW in Germany or some of the large industrial banks in Japan, etc. You need to bring them because they have the experience and the funding needed to create those kind of global economies that they did in Germany, in the US, in Europe, and in Japan, and China, if the relationship would improve. So I think banking would have to be reimagined, in my view.
Okay. So after the global pandemic, there are a lot of economists who are talking about a global slowdown due to recession. So if it is true, do you think how much the banking sector is going to get affected through it? What is your take on it?
My take is that the banking sector will get affected. In the case of international banks, the impact will be even more severe.
Sure.
What are purely domestic banks, given the growth rate, good growth rate in India and the ambitious plans in terms of capital expenditure and focused sectoral expenditure, etc.
Sure.
I think if you align as banking sector with the economic trends and the sectors which are emphasized, because that's where the resource allocation is going to be, then you are better off. You can buck the international trend, as it were. But globally, the slowdown will particularly affect your export-import sectors, and therefore banks that are financing those segments, there will be delays in realization of export receivables and the like. So the global slowdown is significantly caused by that. Second is, as a result of slowdown on the one hand and the pickup in the inflation on the other, interest rates are moving up.
Sure.
Maybe not as dramatically as it was expected 3 months back, but nevertheless, the interest rate regime is higher than what it was last year. So the days of cheap money, the days of low-cost money is not there. So lending is going to be expensive, and industries and the borrowers will have to readjust themselves. And that can certainly in some economies around the world cause non-performing assets or NPAs, as it were. India is not immune to those global trends.
Of course.
And therefore, you need to be watchful of sector or sectoral exposure, etc. The Reserve Bank is a very prudent, very focused regulator, very hands-on in many respects, and they are ahead of the data often. So that is reassuring, because when you have a strong central bank and a central bank that gives you timely guidance and support in terms of liquidity as well, then the banks and the banking sector health is very sound as a result. So the Indian banking sector health is very sound, but the moment you start making one or two big mistakes, individually, banks will have issues.
Sure. Okay, so as an industry expert, what is your take on Heidenberg report, and can this report trigger NPA crisis for the Indian banking sector?
I wouldn't exaggerate the fallout. You see, what is happening is the stock market value or put a price on the Adani sector stocks at a very, very high level. This is quite similar to the technology stocks as well.
Sure.
So I'm not getting here into the politics of it. I'm getting into the economics of this situation.
Yes.
So that valuation, upside, as it were, excessively, is being unwound now, and that is what is causing the losses and the pain, etc. Now, the banking sector has lent money to some of the infrastructure projects of the Adani Group. So those are secured by hard assets. So the balance sheet of most of the Adani Group companies are backed by very strong infrastructure assets. The Mumbai Airport or the Adani Ports or the green energy initiatives and the like. So where these are asset-backed, there is comfort because it's not a fly-by-night situation here. This is a large industrial group here to stay. Where I think the Hindenburg report is a wake-up call is some of the large Indian companies will need to re-examine their governance, in terms of having independent directors, strong independent directors whose profile and credibility, is well established. They need to have a very strong audit committee, independent audit committee. They need to have good, world-class auditors.
True.
They need to be on the right side of the regulations. Because the moment you go to raise bonds globally, or the moment you go to raise equity globally, whether it's private equity or primarily listed equity, then you need to stand up to scrutiny in terms of global standards. I mentioned ESG earlier, environment, social governance, etc. So you need to have a number of criteria and standards. You need to meet them fairly and squarely and transparently. Your financial statements, audited financial statements, should be self-explanatory. Your notes to the account should be self-explanatory. You must bring the credibility of a global accounting firm if you're raising capital globally. You need to, some of the large Indian accounting firms are up to world-class standards. So the moment you have a certain doubt in that score, then investors get nervous and panicky.
Sure.
They start to panic in the process. So that makes the situation worse than it is. So public listed companies in India need to conform to global best practices, world-class standards, not just what the regulator expects as a minimum. So it's not a case of, I'm on the right side of what the regulation says. It's on case of what the expectations are of global institutional investors around the world. And these are institutional investors that have invested in large groups like the Adanis.
Okay, so what you're saying is the corporate governance in India is not up to the mark as compared to the global standard.
I wouldn't generalize, Saimik. I would say that some of the Indian companies are, very well managed, very well governed. They can certainly hold up to the very best in the international arena. But some of the family-owned businesses often don't give this matter the importance that it needs. They build a world-class business, but a world-class business, the moment you start to go to public markets and raise money, need to meet the governance criteria expected of world-class borrowers, world-class issuers of debt or equity. So the moment you are playing, it's like if you're playing in the Olympics, the standards are higher, the expectations are higher, than if you were playing in a local league match.
True.
So even if you meet the criteria domestically, that's not good enough. That's good, but not good enough when it comes to meeting international standards. And international companies in India, Indian MNCs, as I call them, the Indian multinational companies, need to get this message loud and clear that it's a wake-up call. You need to have very, very high standards of governance. And it is like what they say, you're like Caesar's wife. You are not only expected to meet the standards, but you are expected to be, you're seen to be observing them. The public perception needs to be of a high order, and that is not something that you do through PR. It's not a public relations exercise. It's a matter of every day performing to world-class standards and practices as a corporate.
Okay, sure. So, lastly, what would be your suggestion to the young people coming from the financial background who wants to pursue their career in UAE? What would be your suggestion to them?
I think, in my view, you need to get good quality corporate experience for 5, 10 years before you become an entrepreneur.
Okay.
Otherwise you may be in a product specific entrepreneurship, you may be very good in conceiving a product, in creating a technology for it, etc. But your other skills of managing the business may not be there. Either you should be learning on the job and learning very quickly, or you must start with corporate exposure, which is why some of the best business schools in the world expect you to have work experience before you take up an MBA degree. They expect you to have significant work experience, relevant managerial work experience. I think that's a good. So many young entrepreneurs, I find them floundering when it comes to general management of their business. So either they become entrepreneurs and bring in world-class talent in key positions and learn very quickly on the job, or they will make mistakes, and that's not the right way to grow business. You make small mistakes and grow. You could make a large mistake and find that you've lost it all. I would also advise young aspirants for a banking financial career
Sure.
to try and get some global experience as well. India is increasingly becoming a major global player, and it's not sufficient to remain well versed or well experienced just in the domestic arena. I think you need to get a blend of some global experience as well, and that makes for a well-rounded personality.
Okay. So thank you so much, Mr. Kumar. It was lovely talking to you. It was very insightful. Okay, you have so much of knowledge. I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. All the best. All the best.